They say we should have known better than to fall so deep down into this rabbit hole we found. And I was thinking.
Hi, this is Nikolai, and you're listening to My Dad Rafal, co-host James Jardine, and featuring Mr. Jim Tiller on the one and only Down the Security Rabbit Hole podcast. Plug in, listen up, and enjoy.
Deep into this pool of regrettable situations. Pitch black, think back to the last time that we were.
Okie dokie. Good morning, good afternoon, and a good evening to you all. Welcome down the Security Rabbit Hole to yet another edition of the world's favorite cybersecurity podcast, the galaxies. I don't know.
Anybody can claim anything, can't they, Rab?
Anybody can claim anything. That is correct.
That's right.
You don't need facts. Facts are overrated. This is the industry's longest continuously running cybersecurity podcast. So I welcome you all. And I have an awesome guest for you today. We're going to talk a little bit about leadership and a whole bunch of other career-y things. But meanwhile, as we record this on Thursday, January 9th, there is the impending snowpocalypse where I am here in Atlanta. James is completely shielded from it down in the sunny state of Florida.
It's still cold, but we're not getting snow. It's not happening.
That's right. And our guest, Kayla Williams, is in Boston where you don't have snow, which is odd.
No, and it's 30 degrees, which is warm, balmy for this time of year. We should be getting all this snow. It's crazy.
It's 34 outside right now. And it, for a walk this morning wasn't like super cold, but it was cold enough to remind me that it shouldn't be that cold down here. But yeah, that's all right. It's one of those fun things we live through. You get a little bit of adversity. People down here, my kids get a snow day, which is amazing. That's going to be great for them. Although when I was a kid living in Chicago, snow days meant something just a little bit different.
Yeah, it's not like it was, One, do you remember, growing up in New Hampshire, right? We would get up in the morning. You'd have to listen to the radio.
That's right.
For your school to see if it was canceled or delayed. And
don't scroll across the bottom of the TV.
Yeah, there's like 30 SAUs that have to be listed, and you're like waiting for yours. And you know what I'm talking about. Yeah.
Yeah. I feel like they're missing out. These kids today are so spoiled. They get text messages. Like, I think that was a pivotal part of being a kid, like sitting in front of the TV, having a hot chocolate and just like anticipating, like, oh my God.
You'd still get up in the morning.
Ours was on the radio, but but we didn't know until that morning.
That's right.
Right. Mm-hmm. Now
you still got up, you still did your homework.
It's like a hurricane coming 5 days out. They're like, it's going to snow in 5 days. We're going to go ahead and cancel school for that. It's like, what are we doing? And then it doesn't snow.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. Oh, well, Kayla, welcome to the show. And from what appears a beautifully sunny day for you. All right. I wanted to pick you up for the show here because, you scrolled through my LinkedIn feed and I thought, you know what, we need some more leadership stuff to talk about. And you have a very interesting path to the CISO seat. So first, let's start off. Tell us a little bit about yourself, what you do, who you are, what you like, social security number, mother's maiden name.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for having me. I'm Kayla Williams. I'm the CISO of Devo, or Devo Technology. We are a cloud-native SIEM, SOAR, UEBA, all-encompassing data security platform. And I've been in this role for 3 years as of the 5th of this month. So prior to that, I was a VP of GRC, but I think we're going to get into that a little bit later.
We're going to get into that.
Yeah, I can't wait, actually. My likes, well, I do like the snow. I actually went skiing for the first time since I was a child last year, and I loved it. And I'm looking forward to going back. I went up to New Hampshire, of course, what you do in Massachusetts is you go to New Hampshire. And I love to cook. And I'm actually working on a secret project right now where it's going to possibly be a cookbook that comes out from the cybersecurity org because of that. And, a way to give back. So
I love it. We have so many cookbooks in security. I love the fact that we're going to have a CISO cookbook that has nothing to do with security, and it actually really is about cooking. Like, this is going to be fantastic.
yeah,
I'd like
it's
to
got
pre-order.
it will be like, and there'll be some security themes to it, but it won't be about the job. It's actually a legit cookbook. I can go and make my kids' food from it versus
I love it.
everything else that's out there. Yeah, and the intent as of right now is to partner with like a food pantry, a food bank somewhere to give all
Oh,
proceeds
fun.
of sales 100% to.
This
This is
that
good,
cool.
Rev, because you think about it with cooking. It's so many good examples. I mean, a buffer overflow in cooking. Don't overflow the measuring cup.
So that's one of the chapter titles.
Oh shoot!
but it works, doesn't it? Though, right? So it works. And then like
That
maybe
is-
like
yeah,
like
off by
precision.
off by one would be a bad thing in certain recipes.
Yeah.
One extra egg.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I will say that I am not a baker. I am a cook, not a baker.
We've
Yeah.
had it before, right? A teaspoon of salt is very different than a tablespoon of salt. Make
Yes.
cookies the wrong way, and it's
Yeah. Yes.
And suddenly they're a little chewier than you'd like. All right. Well, this is cool. I'm looking forward to it. All right. So you let the cat out of the bag a little bit. Your last job was heading up a GRC program.
Yep.
Long in storied history. Start us at the beginning. When you started out your career, and tell us where that is in a second. But like, did you think, boy, I want to be a CISO someday?
Absolutely not. It wasn't even like on my radar. So I graduated college in 2008 with a bachelor's degree in accounting. So my trajectory was, I'm going to be a CFO. I have
Nice.
finance folks in my family. Growing up, I saw their success. I'm like, oh, that's what I want. I want that life. And then I graduated and I became an external auditor, and I did it for the 2 years that you need to get your CPA. And I realized how much I hated it. Like,
That's awesome.
I hated it. So I would be very honest. I hated it so much. I was like, I'm not creating anything. I'm just looking at the things that other people are doing and finding faults or flaws. And it just wasn't really fulfilling for me. So I moved into the very different world of internal auditing, which, surprise, surprise, it is very different. I moved into a financial services company, a global one. And that gave me the exposure to different functions within this global organization. I was able to do audits on like their treasury department, their operations, their IT functions, project management, legal and compliance. So I got this really well-rounded view of operational risk, regulatory risk, financial risk, security risk, privacy risk, all of these things. And I was like, oh, this is actually really cool. So I got like hands-on experience and got to work with those business units and make a positive impact on customers that we had all over the world. And I liked that. And then about 3 years after that, I moved into their information security organization because they brought in a global CISO. At the time, the company was, they had regional information security officers that were having different tool sets, different priorities. They weren't cross-collaborating at all. So they decided to bring in a global chief information security officer, and his remit was the entire global landscape and was able to kind of bring everybody in and standardize. And I was like, oh, I want to be a part of that, because privacy, this was back in like 2013, was just becoming a thing. That's like when GDPR was being discussed and implications weren't really known. There was all the privacy laws. I'm like, okay, I want to get into that world. And we finished an audit with PwC. They came to our office and we had a bagel breakfast. I'll never forget. And I just walked up to the new CISO and I said, I want to work for you. And I gave him my resume. And we sat there at the table with bagels and just talked as my interview, my first round interview.
Nice.
Yeah, I don't know
Aggressive,
what
but
possessed
nice.
me. Yeah, maybe that's the Boston in me, right? I was just like, I know what I want. I'm gonna go get it. Why not, right?
Perfect.
And he's a British guy, and he was just so polite. I don't think he would have told me to go away because of that.
I mean, he's British, maybe. The Canadians for sure not. The British, maybe.
Yeah, but he didn't really know me. So I think so. For disclosure, I'm married to an Englishman. So he's a Northerner and they're definitely not polite, but you know,
Nope, I'm just going to be here quiet.
We can talk later. We can talk later. Or we can commiserate. But he's like, okay, cool. Like you have audit as a background. That's a skill set we need, which the team I moved into at the time was basically doing controls audits, looking at risk and doing the control audit. So I worked for him for 3 months, got my GISF from SANS. And then, about 3 months in, he pulled me out for drinks with another of the senior managers on his team and said, wow, like you really impressed us. Would you like to move to England for a year and work directly with my leadership team? Yeah, right. That's what I was like. Woo. Yeah, I was like, yes. He's like, okay. And I said yes because I sometimes in life you get these opportunities just once and you have to take a risk. And at the time, on the personal side, I was going through a separation with my husband. I had a 3-year-old daughter. So I was like, all right, if I'm going to be a single mom, I need to have a career. Yeah. So I went to my ex and I said, hey, I'm doing this thing for a year. You guys can come with me. Or, my daughter can come with me, whatever, like, what do you want? And so she stayed home and I went for a year.
Okay.
And she was 3. FaceTime, went home every quarter to see her. Yeah. But it was probably the best decision that I've ever made, not knowing at the time, but now hindsight, right? It's the best decision because of my career since then.
Okay. So that was a launching point. It's interesting. Yeah. I was in a room, good Lord, this has been probably, I keep having to remind myself that like, hey, 2005, 2002, that was 20 years ago plus. It doesn't fit into the old,
I know it doesn't compute for me either.
Like 96 when I graduated high school. Yeah, it was just, oh no, that's been a minute. Oh boy. But even like, so back then, like 2013, way back in 2013, right? This was I was in this room, and I think it was the CISO of, I want to say BMO back in Montreal. I think he was talking forensics, and he said, I can't find I can't find enough security people that know finance, so I'm having to like find good incident responders and then teach them the world of finance so they can go and look at financial fraud potentially, because these things are linked, right? Hacking and fraud, especially at a financial company. And he said, so what I'm finding is I can go get like, basically people out of college with a degree in audit or finance that know like what to look for and where to look for it. And I can teach them the computer side of it. That's they're eager for that. But they're turning out to be better than my cyber people. And I immediately thought, well, crap. That's a piece of our industry that's going away. But it's been a while, and it's an interesting thing that was part of your background, at least at that time, because it gives you an entirely different perspective. You talk to so many people in cyber that are blissfully unaware of the world of finance that like governs everybody's lives and budgets. I was one of those for a long time. I ended up working for a small company called General Electric for a bit, which completely disabused me of any notion of like blissful ignorance of finance. I got my butt kicked 6 ways from Sunday with arguments like, well, but that just has to be secured. They're like, no, let me explain why. Money. All right. Well, that's pretty interesting that you got into it. So you went overseas. Mm-hmm. And
got promoted. I built the service. The Archer, not service now. Archer first. So we built the entire Archer architecture.
Oh God, Archer.
Yeah. This is the Wayback Machine, right? So built that out for the security team, and got promoted into program management there because I finished my bachelor's in 2008 and went right into working full time in my master's degree. So I got that in 2009, but I concentrated in management and project management. So,
okay.
Yeah. So I don't do anything simply. I just can't. You'll come to see that as we continue to talk. So I was like, okay, cool. I get to flex my program project management skills, did that for a year, managing the budgets, the entire program of projects that they were doing. And at that time, the information security group acquired the risk management group. There was actually, funny you mentioned Canada. OSFI is one of the Canadian regulators. They came to us and said, your internal audit team and your risk management team cannot report into the same global head. So you have to split them apart.
Okay.
So for segregation of duties purposes.
Yeah.
So we took over the risk management, enterprise risk management team.
I would have lost all the bets. I would have said that would go the other way.
No, it was incredible because we were able to globalize the same way we did with the security team and standardize how we were talking about risks and controls and process failures. And it was great for like metric reporting and really where I see, just as like a tangent, kind of where I see the CISO role going in the future is to a CISRO, Information Security and Risk Officer.
Okay. I will put a small pin in this because
yes,
and maybe we can talk about this now. We can come back and talk, guys. But every time somebody says risk, a little part of my brain goes, "Are we talking about risk? Or are we talking about something else?" Because there is, I think, risk is the most overused word in our vocabulary as cyber people, and it is the. I'm always reminded of Inigo Montoya. You keep using that word, but I do not think it means what you think it means.
Yes,
right?
I agree. I absolutely agree with you on that. Yes. And I think kind of what we were talking about before, like with my career going to GRC, I think this is where we're going to see more GRC skilled people moving up in the world of security because we understand business risk and the impacts, to your point, of budgets on your priorities and people and how like the people, process, and technology all come together. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I think a pin in that question because I think I actually just posted something on LinkedIn about it yesterday about my prediction for this. So it's all really good timing. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So round this off then. The program management is a very interesting place because, again, I think you've got you're sort of checking all the boxes that I think are lacking in people that become a CISO but struggle. And if you look at the commonalities amongst them, it is missing the background in how the business works, let's say finance, and then the program management aspect of it. Like, how does this, a deadline missed here, affect something over here, right? If we say no to this and it misses the deadline, oh, by the way, that affects revenue. And that means that department can't hire, which means that these 9 projects die or get pushed a quarter. And by the way, that means I can't hire my 3 analysts. And suddenly there's a cascading effect on the business. So that is a huge, huge important thing to have.
I couldn't agree with you more. It is that trickle down effect. It definitely is something that people, I don't think that they're ignorant to it. I think it's more just like, oh, that's somebody else's problem then.
That's right.
And it's kind of like out of sight, out of mind. And that's kind of where you start to see those issues they compound, as you mentioned, like, oh, this doesn't happen. So this and this and this. And then it's all of a sudden you're like, oh, whoops.
How much do you see though? I mean, you see a lot of that though, the people that are lacking those other things, right? They're moving into the CISO role because they came from network security. They came from the highly technical hands-on, I can go in here and, manage a firewall and I can segment a network, but they don't see any other parts of the business, right? Like they work the silo roles versus something like a GRC, something like a program management. You're forced to be out and about amongst the entire organization. Me managing the firewall, I don't need to know anything about the business to know whether I'm going to let that IP in or not, right? Like that type of stuff really changes. And I think once you get to the CISO level roles, right, you start to get more of that's not as a technical role. It's how does it fit with the business? I think that's the big swing we've started seeing over the last couple of years, right? Everybody's talking about the CISO and, having to be able to talk in the business language, having to be able to put everything in a business risk, I don't care about the vulnerability. What's the risk to the business, right? And those backgrounds give a much better insight into that.
Yeah, I look at it as being able to take a business requirements document and then translating it into a functional spec and then going back in the other direction again. Because my day to day is not dealing with the, I want to say the in the weeds, but the boots on ground, change management, network management, the SOC necessarily at that granularity. I have to go and talk to the CEO, the general counsel, finance, the CFO. Like, this is what's happening. This is why this is important to you, specifically to your function, why we have to do certain things. And the governance, risk, and compliance function that I've always been a part of, we're great at steering committees and translating that data and metrics reporting and making it digestible for people who don't understand the difference between a router and a mouse.
So, all right. One, super cool career path. I think that, and by the way, it's super admirable. I always, like, my favorite types of people are not are the types of people that, like, you don't walk up to the pool and go, all right, how cold, what's this water temperature? You're like, pool, water, go. You're like cannonballing it, like, whatever, right? YOLO. But like, that's how I think that's how I've done a lot of things, because especially in, you said you get that one opportunity, right? I had one like that a long time ago, where a company called me up and said, hey, we'd like you to be on this team, but I need an answer. And I was like, I'm in, let's go. let's think about this later. Let's think about the consequences for this later, but I'm in. This is what I want to do. Let's talk a little bit about the direction of the security organization, because I'm about 80% with you on the Chief Information Security and Risk Officer, except I think I may be in a slightly different camp, because I think the word security is going to fall off. It's just going to be CIRO, information risk, because the word security has, James is not going to be surprised to hear me say this, laid an egg, right? Like, we've just not done really well with our own PR from the beginning. It's not gotten better. And so when we say, oh, it's the security people, the reactions you get are the groans, those types of things. Like, we think we're awesome. We're all superheroes and rock stars.
That's why.
But the reality is,
because we refer to ourselves as superheroes and rock stars. That right there tells you you're not.
Right. I think somewhere David Bowie's like, based on his commercials. But I'm always interested, because I think where my personal opinion is, this thing that we do started as a technology problem. Like, we couched it as a technology because it was, right? It was data, it was bits inside of finite pieces of tech. As cybersecurity becomes an information risk thing, and it's really about how I think changing the name makes you think about it differently, hopefully. And it's really the risk that the digital realm, how information that we have, whether we're transmitting it, where we're storing it, processing it, because ultimately that's what it's all about, right? People don't break into things just to wreak havoc very much anymore. It's of the currency is the data. And so information risk, I think, is where it's going. But it isn't, I think the word security implies, is it secure? Yes or no. Risk implies this large spectrum of, like, how risky is it? Like, if I jump into that water, am I certainly dead because it's lava? Or like, is there a piranha somewhere in that river that may nibble on me? Like, where are we on this spectrum?
Yeah, I think that's a good point. So the reason why I think like the CISO is going to become the CISRO, or I think to your point, it probably could just be CIRO. CIRO.
What?
Sure.
What's the difference with the CRO?
So where I come from, that's the Chief Risk Officer, and that is literally everything except for security and privacy.
Yeah.
So it's financial risk, operational risk, operational risk, blowing that out into, like business continuity, process management, looking at like finances, marketing, sales, customer success, all of those different functions, and having specific risk registers tailored to those functions, and having those executives, insert any other CXO that reports into a CEO, know exactly what risks impact their organization. So then having the CISO also have their own risk register and managing their own risk, but then expending that across the organization as well. So when I was at this organization, there was originally just a chief information security officer who then became the chief information security and risk officer, cleaned it all up, and then 2 years later pushed back into the business so that each region had a chief risk officer that reported into the CEO. So he maintained his independent line, and the risk officer reported into the CEO in each region, and then dotted line back into him. It's convoluted. It's a lot. Yeah. I think it's because of finance. Finance has so many laws and regulations globally that require segregation of duties and independence in places where I think if you're in a SaaS company where we're really not regulated that much, right? If you're just a standalone SaaS, not operating in like the world of HIPAA or finance or anything like that, like you're catering to all of them, your regulations and requirements are pushed through contracts from those customers, unless it's GDPR or CCPA. That's separate. So to me, I think to your point, there is going to be this, it's going to get condensed somehow, whatever the title is to be seen, because maybe it starts out as a CISRO and moves into the CIRO where you can remove that security risk. Because you're right, it has a bad rap. We all do. We're the Department of No. We're the roadblocks at the end of the projects because we never considered you to begin with, and now you're here knocking on my door, even though I knew I should have talked to you.
Why are you here?
Yeah. What do you
Come
mean?
back
I have
later
this
when you created my project.
Exactly. Yeah. So I think to your point, there will be a change. Title to be seen. There's actually a show in England called As Yet Untitled. So maybe that's what this is, As Yet Untitled, for what's going to be this figurehead and this role. But they're going to take, because if you think about it, to backtrack a sec, the security organization, we're audited to death constantly, right? Like we have SOC 2s, PCI, maybe a SOC 2 plus HIPAA to demonstrate that compliance, FedRAMP, StateRAMP, SIGs, ISO 27 whatevers. We're audited. We're at the peak. We should be at the peak of our game when it comes to evidence and documentation and being able to demonstrate how we comply with different things where other orgs really aren't. Maybe finance, probably the next one if they're SOX compliant. So I think because of that high standard, it's constant, that we're going to be the ones that they're going to look to and go, oh, you know how to fix stuff. Okay, can you fix this next? How do I fix that? And like working collaboratively, it was just going to lead to this elevation in responsibility.
How do we get off the hamster wheel? And by that, I mean, buy more stuff, get hacked, buy more stuff, get hacked, buy more stuff, get hacked, buy more stuff, get hacked that never ends. What's your take on this? Because I feel like there's two bad paths, Kayla. There's this is sort of the curse of the CISO that I've seen. You ask for a budget, you demonstrate, you say bad things will happen if we don't do this. The business says nah, and nothing happens. Okay, then you're like, well, if we just do more of the same until something happens. I think equally bad is you say if we don't get budget, bad things will happen. You get budget, and something happens, and then you're like, ooh. Well, and that's where, like, I think the word security has made it ingrained in people's heads. It's like, if I buy this SIM, this EDR, this NDR, this firewall, this whatever, thing, it will make me more secure by X%. And that's never been the case. And we've tried to do maths on this. And it's always just sort of catastrophically funny when somebody tries to back into a math formula or an equation. Like, this is our risk equation is, you're like, wow, that's that long. By the way, that variable can be anything you want it to be. So if the equation starts to look bad, you're like, ooh, adjust this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
How does this go? Because that's the thing that's all people say, what keeps you up at night? The fact that either things happen or they don't happen, and both of those are bad for us.
I think it's controversial to say this, but I'm going to say it anyway. It starts with your processes. If you have an understanding of what your process is, you can then talk about the risk that's there. And risk is not just the bad stuff that happened. Risk is also opportunity, right? Like me moving to England was a risk, but it was an opportunity. It was a good
That's
thing.
right.
So knowing what that risk is tied to that particular process, you have a better chance of saying, ooh, my process doesn't address this. How do I fix that? And like, it kind of all starts there. And then you look at your risk and then you say, okay, I'm going to fix it or I'm not going to fix it, which is basically a remediation plan or a risk acceptance. So I think it all comes back down to that understanding of that risk. I hate that. I've said it like 1,000 times now, but coming down to that function and understanding that. And not everyone has that skill set and it's not easy. But I tell people, especially in the other functions, like you do it every day. It's business management. Risk management is business management. Just forget the nomenclature that comes with risks and controls and process and inherent and residual. Like forget all that stuff. Take it back to the basics and look at what you're trying to do and what could go catastrophically wrong or catastrophically right. And then figure out what you're going to do to address, kind of have like a contingency plan and put processes in place or address them eventually. And then you'll be okay. Of course, there's going to be stuff you can't address. That's just business. You have to take risk, good or bad, to do business. And that's really where that discipline comes in.
Is that where though, like security gets the bad egg smell though? Is because we've made things so convoluted, right? I mean, we have to talk about everything. The fact that we have to say, oh, well, to go talk to business, you have to talk in their language. Right there immediately says we're doing it wrong. Because again, like you said, if you go back to it and say, look, you don't have to use all these fancy terms and understand all this stuff. Like just lay out what you do and think about what could go wrong. You know, it's not at the super technical level, but that's what we push it to. And that's, I think, why you see we don't have a ton of people, right? GRC is not the sexy side of security by any means.
Oh God, no. It's awful. And it's my life. It is so boring.
Right? Like, people want to do the pen testing. They want to do the offensive security. They want to, you know,
that's the sexy fun stuff.
Yeah,
of
like
course. Yeah,
that's the stuff that people are doing, but that's not the stuff moving the needle towards the crux of the issue, which is we still don't understand our processes and our procedures. But I can tell you how I went in and scripted this thing, you know, to stop this specific attack. And it's like, that's great, but you know, it's not related to the business whatsoever. Right. I mean, it didn't help move that needle. And I think that's what we see. Like so many businesses are moving this other side up and they're saying, hey, we're building this wall, but my castle's over there, you know, and it's like, we're missing the point of it.
Yeah. And a lot of those things don't, I guess, show up as security incidents. They show up as operational incidents because there is no QA. There is no automation. Maybe it's all manual processes, but the process isn't documented fully, or it lives inside, you know, George's head and George is on vacation. And now, you know, someone's trying to wing it because they've seen him do it once or twice and they forget a step. And now all of a sudden you have an issue, and it might not be a security incident, event, or a breach, but it might be an operational one where now you're down and your customers can't do their job. So then all of a sudden the CISO team does get a call because, hey, data is no longer available. This could be an incident. And now you're looping in your SOC and you're looping in your NOC and you're looping in all these other people, but it all traces right back down to that process that wasn't understood or documented, which is the GRC unsexy documentation side. Because I mean, my entire career, right? Audit, internal, external, through GRC up into this role, is they see me coming and they're like, what are you doing here? What do you want? I'm like, well, I'm
making sure you stay employed is the answer.
Yeah, like, hey guys, like, I don't want to say SOC 2 one more time, but for SOC 2 purposes, you have to follow this process. And they're like, why? It's easier if I just, you know, bypass this control and go in as an admin and grant access to someone. Yeah, but that's not the process. But it's easier. I understand that. But what if something goes wrong? Do you want to be held accountable? Oh, no, you know, I'm going to use this API that doesn't even show my name. There's no audit trail. It's fine.
So a couple episodes ago, we had this very theoretical discussion. We had an interesting, and if you haven't listened to it, it might be one for you to mull over, because we talked about the future of what is now called security operations, a SOC, right? Mm-hmm. And there's thoughts of changing the name, because the SOC tends to be like the help desk for security and also other random things that fall into our bucket. And like, Cyber Defense Center was thrown around the CDC, although I don't want to work for the CDC. That kind of thing. And excuse me, I think where my head's at is after watching this for over a quarter century kind of roll by is you have, I think it's coming out into like essentially 3 categories under security or whatever this role is. You've got the policy and governance, right? So this is like we say what the guardrails are, and the business can operate within these guardrails. But you want to step outside the guardrails, you got to talk to us again, right? Yeah. So and we make sure that it's all being followed and audited. So there's like that GRC function. There is an engineering function which serves effectively 2 things. One, it builds things for the business and builds things for customers. So you've got, if you're a customer facing organization, as pretty much everybody is now, you're building software, right? You're making sure that security is built into that. And you are also building things as the company. You pulled out new laptops, you set, kind of make sure that those things get done. And then there's that last function, which is like generic operations, which is and what do you do with that? And you can either have a generic ops, which was what we have today, or you can split that and actually have operations and then detection and response, right? Or cyber defense. Because security operations says, like, just by the name of it, the things that we do on an everyday basis to make sure that, put the grease in the gears to make sure it runs. But that's not the defensive work. That's not always the same. It's not repetitive. It's not closing tickets, right? What's your thought on what your team looks like in a couple of years, or what these teams look like in a couple of years?
It's funny you said that, like the computer defense, because that's what we had started to call the team.
Oh, nice.
But it wasn't computer defense. We did have defense in the title, and we were like, no, it just didn't work. So we went back to the SOC. I mean, being a security platform team product, there's a lot of like duplicative team names in the company. So like,
yeah, I imagine
security. There's also security engineering team. Security engineering.
Yep.
Like So we toyed around before with security assurance instead of the security engineering, and they were providing assurance of of security. It was essentially what their roadmap kind of looked like and what they were doing. That what other functions were establishing met the minimums that we or our customers had set for expectations of us. And I kind of think that the SOC team, I mean, that name is, you're right. It's like a junk drawer.
Yeah. And it doesn't make it easier to be on that team, because you're getting called to reset a password, why that patch broke that thing. And by the way, there's a new threat actor. Hey, are we getting targeted by which one am I doing right now?
Yes. And then also part of that is, going out and, so-and-so's acquired a new application. Let's make sure we get their logs, and we're bringing those in and collaborating with that team and the vendor to make sure that it works. And it doesn't work. We got to find a workaround. So yeah, I don't know what that title would be, because you're right. CDC is not, that's not a good name, but it needs to be something that's like all encompassing of what they do.
There's only one CDC, and that's the cult of the dead cow. And that's all we need to say about that. Everybody else is an imposter.
We used to have the same problem a long time ago. They used to have application security specialists, which was not a good name either.
You're such a...
Yes.
That's a good one.
Hey, by the way, so we're running here on time, but by the way, since you spent some time in England, Jimmy Carr's 8 out of 10 cats, fan or not?
Oh, love him. I went to Montreal last year and saw him, sat front row, got heckled, loved it. Every second of it. He's great.
Yeah, the one thing I learned about him is you never get up during his show ever. Like, unless you're having a severe medical emergency, you just sit or you will get picked on.
Yeah. Jimmy Carr's great. We just watched, I don't know if you have it on YouTube, but you can get the end of the year, the big fat quiz of the year that he hosts. He's hosted it every year.
I did not see
2003.
that. I have to go catch that.
Yeah, since it's been on for 20 years, and he hosts it every year.
Okay.
So that's good. I recommend it.
Big fat quiz of the year. All right. That's what I'm going to have to go check out. Well, cool. Hey, we're going to do some more of these, probably theory meets reality in kind of the future of security. I'm going to invite you back on because
Yeah.
you've got some practicals, and I appreciate that you have a perspective that isn't a technologist's. While I love all my technologist friends, this perspective of a finance person and a sort of the very, very high business level is really unique. That's got to make you that's got to give you an entirely different view of what we do every day.
It certainly does. And when I first came into this role, a lot of folks were like, yeah, but you're not technical. Like, you've never written a line of code. How can you tell me how to do my job? And I'm like, easy. I'm like, I know what you should be doing. The standards. I can tell you're not doing it. This is how you do your job.
That's right.
I
like it.
It's also, I'll give a shout out to my team though. Like, honestly, like everyone that's ever worked for me in this role and those who have been my mentors, the circle in our community is amazing, right? Like,
Yeah.
I've had so many people say they seem to be pulling the wool over your eyes. Like, let's take a look at this a little bit more deeply. Here's the questions to ask, and always just having my back on everything, because I do have that different perspective, and I ask questions that come up one side when the technical people come up another, and that bridge that we have together works really well. And I encourage other folks who are hiring into the CISO role, like, to look at it, because it's been very beneficial.
Awesome. Well, two things I'm looking forward to having you back on the show and your cookbook. So let us know if that comes out anytime soon. I'd love to tell the listeners about it. But Kayla, thanks for joining us. This has been a lot of fun. I can't believe we just did like 40 some odd minutes of this conversation. I appreciate your perspective. I wish you much luck. And thanks for being on the show.
Thank you so much, guys.
All right, folks, thanks for listening to another episode of the Down the Security Rabbit Hole podcast. Hope you enjoyed it. And as you know, we have a LinkedIn page where we're going to start posting I'm going to start posting the place where you can peek in on the live recordings of these. So you can kind of get a preview of the show before the show, and you can watch the videos and all that. So go check that out. Check us out on YouTube. Shoot us a like, and if you got some comments in there, those would be fine too. Subscriptions are welcome. This is how we grow and get people like this awesome CISO here on the show, so you guys can learn from. And so until next time, thanks for listening. We'll catch you guys another place, another time, another